Hello, everyone. We're waiting for Dr. Sierra Baird to join here. She is a psychologist talking to us today about performance anxiety. I know this is an issue. Oh, here we go. We might. I think we're getting her to join us now. This is an issue that I know a lot of musicians struggle with. So as we're having this conversation, hello.
Hello.
It worked.
We got it.
We got it. There's always technical difficulties at the beginning. No worries. I was just
That's
telling
always with me.
everyone,
I don't know if it's just me, but
no,
I
no, no, it's not.
definitely
I
have them.
promise. I was just telling everyone, if you want to drop questions as we're talking, feel free. This is an issue. I'm going to kind of focus our conversation on performance anxiety because I know this is an issue that I've talked about on my own account. And I know Dr. Sierra Baird has talked about it on her account as well. So we'll kind of center some of our discussion on that. But if you have any additional questions as we're talking, feel free to drop them in the chat here. I think there's a question button too on your lower right side. So feel free to drop those there if you want. Great. Well, welcome, Dr. Baird. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. So far, I've only interviewed other voice teachers, so you're my first psychologist that I've gotten to talk to on Instagram here. So I'll just kind of say how we met. We actually met online in this virtual reality, this virtual world. So I'm a voice teacher, but I have talked a little bit about performance anxiety on my own to my students. Of course, that's something that comes up quite a bit. And honestly, that's something that I've started struggling with for the first time over the past 2 or 3 years, which is new to me. So trying to navigate this world has been confusing, and it's also given me greater empathy for my own students who struggle with it. But I guess we just kind of ran across each other that way on Instagram. And yeah, and it's been really great to follow your work and some of your advice that you post online. So yeah, let's see. So I always like to ask people for icebreaker questions to begin with. So
Okay.
someone asks, this is Stephanie. She asks, what hobbies or activities do you do during your downtime?
Ooh, okay, that's a good one. I have 2 little girls. They are 2 and 3. And so one thing I do is I chase them around a lot and keep them out of trouble and just try to have fun with them. So that's one thing. Also, I'm a singer-songwriter. So
Yes.
I'm even doing this songwriting challenge this week at the Songwriter Academy, which is
Oh,
super cool.
wow.
So
That's
when I can, I
great.
like to fit stuff like that into my time.
That's great. And I love hearing that because I think a lot of times, again, being a voice teacher and working a lot with professional musicians, music starts as a hobby and then it becomes a job. It's hard to kind of keep that
Mm-hmm.
perspective, that love of music. So, which I think is one thing actually that during COVID, a lot of people have kind of come back to is coming back to music as a creative art form rather than a job, because a lot
Yeah.
of people don't have it as a job anymore. But
Right.
it's
Some of
been good
those.
to rediscover some of that, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so the first question I want to ask you is just a little bit more about your background. How did you become a psychologist? What led you there? And also, you specialize specifically in working with musicians. So
Mhm.
I'd love to hear about how that came about and how those interests kind of culminated.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start long time ago as a little kid. So my dad, he was a really great singer-songwriter, musician. He was in really successful bands. And so I watched him as a kid and I just thought, oh, I'm a songwriter too. And so I would write songs as a little kid. I would do assignments in song form, and that was just like part of my identity. And then growing up and going to college, I tried on a lot of different things, just to see what fit best. And I started as a music major, and then I changed to music therapy, and then I changed to, well, and then I graduated, but I did a master's in linguistics, and then I have a
Oh,
doctorate in
wow.
counseling psychology. But all along that way, like going to different schools, I would always take music classes. So I'd take songwriting classes or join choirs. I did voice lessons, you know, guitar, piano. I took all those at the college level. And I feel like that's really informed the direction and where I've ended up. So I work as a psychologist now. I own my own practice, and I do psychology work and music performance coaching, and there's a lot of overlap. But as a psychologist, I just work within state. We're just licensed by state. So
Right.
instead, I'm like, but I really want to work with musicians and kind of on a broader scale. And so I do that now, and I help people mostly a lot of times in the space of performance anxiety and this space. So I come by this really naturally. So growing up, I always wanted to make music, but I didn't really want to perform for people. And that was
Mm-hmm.
always really intimidating for me. And no matter how much I practiced something and how good I sounded, as soon as I stepped in front of people, my performance went down and I didn't understand that. And it was kind of a fear cycle. I got really stuck in that. So this like where I'm at business wise and what I've started here has come out of a really genuine place of, oh, I have names for that now. And that is like, I teach people in therapy on a regular basis how to work with their bodies and how to work through this. So it came together really naturally. It's kind of fun that way.
That's really cool. That reminds me of kind of my own philosophy in teaching voice, which I'm sure I'll just
Mm,
keep reiterating this as we continue. But it's interesting because what you said about being able to name it, you know, I think that when I started studying voice, everything was so mysterious to me because the voice is pretty mysterious. We can't see it, right? It's inside. And then when I started learning more about the anatomy, the science behind it. I thought I was going to be very entangled by all of that, and maybe it was going to inhibit my performance, but I found it did the
mm,
exact opposite thing. And knowing those kinds of things helped me to, when I was up in front of people and something went wrong, instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know how to solve this. I thought, okay, I know exactly what this is tongue tension. I need to, I need to do this. I need to release my tongue and I'll be fine. Right. Or,
mhm.
I'm sure with performance anxiety, this is a breath issue. I need to just take some deep breaths and I know it will be fine. It's a response,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
And along those lines, like I know what's happening. So the like negative narrative doesn't need to kick in of like, oh, what's wrong with me? I can never do this
exactly.
right. This is always what happens. We can bypass
Right.
that because we know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I guess for those of you out there that don't know, Caitlin is my voice teacher.
Yes,
So
I just started working with Sierra. It's
yes.
great.
And I love these things that you teach because it's true. It's like as soon as I know the mechanism or what's happening in the body, then I'm like, oh, that's how I trigger that or let go of that. It's been really cool. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. I love finding the crossover in this work. Of course, our
Hmm.
work is really going to cross over a lot because
Yes, it
singing
does.
is very mental.
Hmm.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. What are some of your favorite tips or advice for performers that struggle with performance anxiety? So I know this is your whole life, so I know you probably have a lot to say on this
I
subject,
do.
but maybe
Yeah.
maybe just like a few like nuggets that you can give us today.
Yeah. Let me pull. I have my notes here. How do you steady your phone? I'm holding mine. I don't want to make anyone
Oh,
dizzy.
no, you're fine. I have a little stand that I finally broke down and
That
bought.
you put your phone on. Okay, that's
Yeah.
why I tried to hop on the computer because I'm like I won't be moving around. But
Well, that's good to know. I didn't know that it didn't work on a computer, so now we
I
know.
didn't know either. Okay, let me look at my notes here of what I've got because I there is so much to talk about.
I know, I know.
And I do love it, so I could talk about it for a long time. Okay, this is one of the first go-to things that I love teaching because it's something you can implement in your practice and then see right away. So I call it the exercise effect. Effect that's from the article that I learned the concepts from. It was called exercise effect.
Hmm.
But basically, it's the idea that a lot of our a lot of our physical sensations will overlap in different situations. So if you think about it, like fear and excitement feel the same in our body, but the meaning we attach to it makes it very different, right? Then it makes one very like enjoyable, and it makes one like, oh, we don't want to feel fear, so we like pull back from that. But it's the same actual physical sensations of your heart's pounding. You might feel tingles. You might kind of lose your breath quickly, and um, and there's another piece of that to work in, which is exercise has the same physical many of the same physical sensations as anxiety.
Mm.
And so I like to use this idea of overlapping sensations to work with your body. So if you think of it, light exercise, so nothing too strenuous where you're going to like not be able to breathe, a
Hmm.
couple jumping jacks, sit-ups, whatever you prefer to do. If you hop in and do that, your body will have the sensations of anxiety. So say you're in your performance space, you do this exercise effect, you get your heart rate up, and then you hop into your music, you hop into your practice. You're basically practicing with the sensations of anxiety. So then you hop on stage somewhere and you start feeling that. And it's not a new sensation. It's actually something you've been working into your practice, you've been doing. I usually say, like, try to do it once a day when you practice. But if you can't do that, do it a couple times a week and just do it like for a portion of your practice. Like maybe you'll practice and then at the end, you hop in and do that. But I love this because then those sensations, we're learning that those sensations are safe
Yes.
and expected, and we're
Right.
predicting that they're going to be there. And then when they're there, we know how to work with them. So like even just the voice and like working with your throat, if you feel, tongue tension or any strain there when you're anxious, you will feel that when you're doing the exercise effect, and you'll know how to make those adjustments you need to work with your body. So that's
Right.
one thing that I love sharing that because it's so simple, but it helps our body learn what to do with those sensations and what they mean, right? Then it's this like, yes, I've got this feeling rather than, oh no, oh no, 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 my body's doing that again.
Absolutely. And yeah, without trying to make this into a therapy session, I know that for myself, a lot of times when I start to feel those, or when I started to feel anxiety for the first time, I said a couple of years ago, for those of you that just joining, I started to struggle with performance anxiety for the first time really in my life. And it was really scary. And I think part of the thing I was doing at the beginning was running away from all of those sensations. Don't feel that, don't feel that. And then I would just
Yeah.
start panicking about panicking, right? It wasn't even that anything was
Right.
happening at this point. I was just trying
Right.
to dig my claws in and not have those feelings. But I like this, what you're saying about go ahead and have the feelings and realize, don't put a judgment on them. They're not good.
Yeah.
They're not bad. It's just a response. And yeah, I love that. I've done that actually since you have suggested that, like in some
Mm.
of your posts.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
tried that a few times. I want to continue to work with that, but it has been really interesting to, to just get your heart rate up a little bit and then sing in your own practice space. And then I had a recital last week and felt those things again. And I was able to kind of be like, okay, it's just a feel. It's just, it's just a high
Mm-hmm.
heart rate. It's nothing I haven't done before. So yeah, I
Right.
can see how that would be really helpful.
Right. And it's really accessible too. Like
Right.
I do it and it doesn't need to look one way. So I do it. I will kind of dance around in my living room just
Yeah,
a little.
that's
My
great.
preference for exercise
Hmm.
is dance. So
Hmm.
I'll dance around a little bit in my living room while I'm singing show tunes to
Love that.
my
Yeah.
daughters. And like that is like that's my experience of it, and mentally I know that's my experience of it. So when I'm doing that, I'm saying, ooh, look at those sensations, it's happening, I can do this. Another example would be like if you go out on a walk, you're going to get those sensations of anxiety. So a lot of them is like the heart beating faster, the shaky, the sweaty, the maybe you lose your breath a little bit. But those are all the same symptoms. And so like it doesn't need to look one way. It doesn't need to be mechanic. It can be you walking up a hill
Yeah.
and focusing your attention and working on maintaining poise. So we
Mm.
could be having this conversation on a walk and I could feel out of breath, but I could notice those sensations and then, redirect my energy to what I'm doing and coming across the way I want to. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what we need to do on the stage, right? We hop up there
Right.
and our body's doing that. And it's not an indication that anything's wrong. It's just an indication that we're human and we're in a high stress situation. And so then to take that and face it very differently, to say, oh, look, my body's working.
Mm.
What am I going to do with this? And how do I want to come across? And just maintain that poise and work on coming across the way you want to.
Mm.
It's really, really a cool thing, super accessible, and I really recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really neat. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we move on to the next question? As far as tips
Yeah,
that
let
you
me
like?
look. I'd love tips. I just love the like, okay, take this and try this.
I
Try it
know,
on, you
and I
know?
know, and that's not, I mean, obviously on this social media on Instagram, both of us are kind of doing this. We're giving these small little, short 15-second, 30-second clips, but I mean, there's no way to get the full effect of this without therapy or voice lessons or whatever. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg, so we
Right. It
understand
takes
that.
time too, right? It takes
Yeah,
time
yeah.
because a
Hmm.
lot of what you're doing, like, I, I like to explain it like this, like what you're working on, what I'm pushing you towards will
Hmm.
feel counterintuitive. It
Right,
will.
right.
And that does not mean it's wrong. And
Mm,
that's such a hurdle to get through. So a lot of it is like feeling those sensations. Actually, let me talk about that for just a second.
okay.
So our body has a built-in like safety mechanism, and in psychology we call it automated avoidance. But it's this idea that um, when our body feels discomfort, it will push to get out of it.
Hmm.
So that's like a safety mechanism in a lot of ways. But then on the flip side of that, anytime we're pushing ourselves to grow and do courageous things, we're going to feel uncomfortable. And we can expect that. Our body's going to kick in and want to kind of pull us out of that and save us from it, save us. But
Hmm.
what we have to do feels counterintuitive to really step into that discomfort. So I talk about discomfort a lot. I talk about, so it's the automated avoidance where our body wants to be like, I'm not doing that. But if we do that, and we do that, I'll just say that
Yeah.
we do that, we all do it in very
Absolutely.
little subtle ways that we're
Uh-huh.
probably unaware of for the most part.
Mm, mm.
So I like to break down that process for people of like noticing what those things are and how to do that. Because once you start noticing it, you can kind of change that paradigm and that mind shift to say, okay, when I'm feeling uncomfortable, it means I'm growing.
Mm.
This is okay. I can sit with this. I can do this. And also, when you're tuning in on that granular of a level two, you can start to see, whoa, this was hard for me last week or last month, and now it's not. And then you can really start to see your growth, excelling. Like you have the accelerator on because you're like, oh, I get it. So then that muscle just becomes stronger of, I can't do this. Oh, no, wait, I can do this. I've done this before. Oh, yeah, it just feels uncomfortable in this way this time. It's just this process. So really that process of like pushing towards those things that we value and,
Mm.
creating music and sharing that with others. And what a cool skill that is that not a lot of people have. So it's
Yeah.
like pushing into that space to say, I want to do this. And I know that to do this, I'm going to feel uncomfortable. And that's okay. I'll say that to my girls a lot. They'll say, I feel this way. And I'll say, okay, it's okay to feel that way. And I do that to myself too. I feel uncomfortable, again, a skill to like kind of practice on different levels, going into hard conversations, hopping on an interview for the first time on Instagram,
Yeah. Right.
or like when things don't go the way we want, to really just like check in and say, oh, okay. Oh, I'm feeling that. Yeah, I can do that.
Mm.
This
Hmm.
means growth. This signals growth.
Hmm.
So
Mm. I love
there's
that.
there's this what is it? A TED Talk by Kelly McGonigal. She does a really great job, and she talks about this concept. But she has this like one phrase in there. I use it all the time. She said, "When you're in this place, you can tune in and say, oh my gosh, my body knows exactly what it's doing." And that's if we can tune into that river of my body knows exactly what it's doing,
Mm.
we're just unstoppable
Mm.
because then it's okay, I can feel this and keep pushing.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
So
So
many
that
life
concept of
lessons. I love that. Yeah.
automated avoidance,
Wow.
discomfort, and like that paradigm shift of what to do with it all.
Hmm. Hmm. Can you see the questions on your end, or are we just getting them on my end?
No, I think it might be kind of frozen, or I haven't
Oh,
seen
okay.
anything come through if it
Okay.
is.
I have a question from Stephanie. She says, is that different than fight, flight, and freeze, or is that along the same lines?
Ooh, good question. Okay, who was it? Tiffany?
Stephanie.
Stephanie.
Hmm.
Stephanie. Oh, that's a good question, Stephanie. So we have these automated responses that like are those built-in safety mechanisms, and that's the fight, flight, freeze. And there's another one, people will talk about fawn, that you might fawn and kind of bat your eyes to get out of the situation.
Oh,
But
wow.
we
Okay.
have these like automatic responses.
Hmm.
And those are, I mean, a lot of those will kick in when we are in real danger. So like if we're in real danger, like our body knows what to do too. But it is an automatic response, those are.
Hmm.
So what I'm talking about is really slowing down that process in between. Okay, this scary thing is happening, and how am I going to respond to it? I'm really like pushing for that space in between there to say, how do I, okay, this is happening. What does it mean? And given the situation, how do I want to respond? So it is different from those, and we're pushing to a space that's different, and your body will still kick into those. You might be on stage and want to bolt or forget your lines or whatever. But the process is slowing that down, tuning back in, and then just like really intentionally making decisions about how to respond. And to do that, you've got to be really self-aware on that granular level of, okay, what's happening for me? What does it mean? What are my typical body responses? And what do I want them to be? But
Mm-hmm.
that's a really good question. So that is like what we're working on. We're saying, look, there are times we're in danger and there are times we're not, but it feels like we are. And the stage is one of those. Recording studios are another one of those. You know, you practice, 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 hop in a recording studio, and your response might be totally different.
Yeah.
Your voice might come out, your music, your instrument might sound totally different.
Mm.
So it's really slowing down that process to say, okay, I'm not actually in danger here. What do I want to do with these sensations and what's happening?
Yeah. Again, I really like that it's not about stopping those initial sensations, right? It's about working with them
Yeah,
and
that's
responding to
actually,
them.
yeah, I'm glad you cued into that because that's actually a common misconception and something that people will teach. It's like, how can I feel good so that I can perform good?
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? And
Right.
that makes sense logically, but actually the truth is like your body's feeling that way because you are in a high stress situation. And imagine like if you were entering high stress situations and you didn't have any of those responses. That would almost be diagnosable, right?
Right.
Say
Right.
you're in a car wreck and you're just like,
Whatever.
right, that might
Yeah.
also be trauma. But like if you stepped on a stage and you're like,
Hmm.
whatever, that might be kind of odd. But people often focus on, okay, how can I feel good so that I can perform good, so that I can
Mm.
perform at my best. And the truth is, like in psychology, we know that, well, a lot of the research points to that we don't have to feel good. And actually, if we can direct our attention elsewhere and not on how we're feeling and what that might mean about us, and direct it instead on like what we plan and hope to accomplish and the skills that we've learned, oh, we'll be so much more successful. And the other, like if you do fall into that stream of, okay, I need to feel good so that I can perform good or perform well and do my best, that's a bit of an avoidance strategy. Because then when are you going to feel good stepping in front of a bunch of people? If you naturally come by that, that's awesome. For the
Hmm.
rest of us, that's a high stress situation. And the problem is not that you're feeling it, but learning that skill of slowing things down, choosing how you're responding, and trusting yourself. And then, on the flip side of that, pushing through to this sunny place of, oh my goodness, I'm enjoying this, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Because that was my experience, growing up being so terrified, being, so afraid of my physical responses while performing, and then getting to a place as an adult, like, whoa, this is really cool. Like all these eyes are on me and they care what I have to say and what I'm singing. And, that's a really cool place to get to.
Mm. Yeah. 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 We have a comment here. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Before I perform, I feel so excited, like my heart is dying. At the time, I feel so alive. I talk with myself. I'm living for this feeling. Yeah. So
Yes.
again, embracing those sensations instead of running away
Oh, I
from those
love that. Who
things.
was, oh, you
Yeah.
didn't know the
Uh,
pronunciation of the name.
it's Dogu. I'm really afraid to pronounce
Okay.
this.
Well, I love that because that's exactly what we're talking about. Because you could
Yeah.
just as easily say, oh no, I think I'm dying. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you could
Mm-hmm.
just as
Yeah.
easily say, something's wrong with me. I think I should go to a hospital instead of the stage.
Right. Right.
Because
Right.
it does feel like that. But instead to say, oh, I live for this feeling.
Yeah.
Like you're
Yeah.
turning the whole game on its head. Like you are changing the game for yourself. And not only that, like on a technical sense, like the neural pathways that you're developing and like the connections that you're making in your mind are so powerful that like that just strengthens and gets better with time too. So it's all like it builds on itself little by little, but what you're doing is actually changing the experience for you. You might start
Yes.
out kind of like maybe faking it. Oh, I live for this situation, you know.
Yeah.
But then like you're actually helping your mind like
Fake
strengthen
it till
that
you
and be
make it,
like,
quite literally. Yeah.
yes, I can
Yeah.
get out there. I can
Yes.
do this.
Yes. Yes. Oh, he says you can call me Danny. Hello. Thank you, Danny.
No, thanks, Danny. Yeah, great comment. I love that. That's exactly what we're talking about. I
Yeah,
wish I could
that's
see the
great.
comments. I can't. I'm glad you're reading
It's
them.
great. Yeah, I'll read them out. So if you have any questions as we're going through, those of you that are listening, feel free to ask in the comments or using that little question button at the bottom. I've never used that question button, but I assume it works. So, um, yeah, and one other thing too, I think that's really important. Um, again, when I started experiencing this recently, was just knowing that I wasn't broken, that I wasn't weird, that it was normal. It was a normal thing that was happening to me, and it wasn't like something I would never be able to get through, because that's how it feels a
Hmm.
lot of the times, right?
Oh,
That
yeah,
that
yeah.
you're never gonna overcome this, or you'll never figure out how to deal with it. In the moment, for
Yeah.
sure, it feels like that a lot of
Yeah, I think
times.
it's really deterring to people. I know
Hmm.
it has been for me
Hmm.
in different settings, but just this idea of like, if I don't know what's happening and I don't know how to fix it, then maybe I should shift. Maybe I should do something else with my life. You know, what a loss to shift away from music and this really cool skill to create and connect with people.
Exactly. Yeah,
But you're right.
exactly.
And it makes me wonder too, like during COVID, because so many performance settings have shut down, you know, or even studio settings, it makes me wonder coming out of this if people will experience it more at first, because it is that muscle and maybe it's been relaxed, not stepping in front of people. But also the idea that like you can definitely push through and get back to that place where it is comfortable, or even if it's never been comfortable, that it is.
Exactly. Yeah, in talking to my friends that are also musicians, I think most of them have expressed some kind of um, if they go back on stage for the first time, even if it's for a few people during COVID, everyone has said that they kind of are starting to get those same feelings that they used to get when they first
Yeah.
started performing when they were younger, which is super interesting. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
wondering too how this will affect
Yeah.
musicians
I'm
getting
interested
back
to
into the real
see.
world. Yeah. Hmm.
And it would
Hmm.
be totally normal if that was the case.
Hmm.
And it's just that muscle and that we've been cooped up for a bit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm noticing that in my social interactions when I talk to people, suddenly, like, when people are listening to me, I'm like, my mind goes blank because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not used
Yeah.
to like real attention from real people anymore.
Yes, totally.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So, let's see here. My next question, what other mindset things do you discuss to help musicians? So we've talked a lot about performance anxiety. What are some other things that you discuss that can help musicians as they perform or practice?
Ooh, okay, I have one that popped in. This is something I talk about regularly and I teach. I talk about cues. And it's like you said, so much of singing is mental. It's that same concept. And I use cues as a way to inform and deepen your practice and performance. So, by cues, I just mean like it could be one word or a sentence, but it's just really short and it's creative. So let me back up for a second and explain something. I find that in our lives, we are really good at filtering communication and filtering our actions. So like we know it's appropriate in different situations. And even if we're having the worst day ever, if someone says, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing good. Right? We just have these filters built in that we're just really good at. But there are ways creatively to get around that when what you want is to stretch yourself and grow. So I use these cues, and let me think of a couple. And I personally, during my practice, will just cycle through them to push my performance in new ways. So
Hmm.
one cue might be find freedom. Okay. And I might take that and use that in my practice and find freedom within the song, within the
Hmm.
lyrics. And what it does is it just deepens that performance and it allows you to explore that space in a way that is so creative that we don't have filters for that. So we actually we let more of ourself out instead of saying, okay, do this just like this. Here's your checklist and do it just like this. Then we're getting really stiff and we're right. I mean, I know you know
Yeah.
because you're my
Oh,
voice
yeah.
teacher and you
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about these things. But it's this idea of like we can get stuck pretty good. And so I use cues to get unstuck. So another one I really enjoy, another cue is enjoy confidence.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
so I'd like to take that and then dive into a practice and just enjoy the confidence or, let my sassy self come through when that's maybe not what I would naturally do. So
Right.
cues is something that I do. It's like really creative and fun and um, just so expansive because a cue can
Yeah.
be anything. And so I love when people get creative with it too. It doesn't look one way, it looks lots of ways. But it
Yeah.
helps us explore our inner dialogue and our inner narrative of like who we are as musicians. Well, I'm confident and I'm enjoying that. Or like this freedom or and I go through and I have like different sections with different kinds of cues to kind of spark different things in people. But just this concept. I don't know, do you use that in your work?
No, well, the only
Mm.
thing I can think of that's kind of similar is sometimes I'll feel stuck with an interpretation of a song that I'm working on. And so this is something that my teacher used to tell me. She said, try the opposite emotion than you think would be appropriate and just see what happens and try
Mm-hmm.
just to try to find that creative side of things. So that's the only thing that
Yes.
kind of reminds me of that. But I really like what you just said, and I want to try that because I think a lot of times when we do a lot of technique work, or even when we're just working on interpretation, we can get stuck. So I like this idea of,
Mm-hmm.
maybe doing the same. I'm practicing this song today and tomorrow because I really need to learn this song, but this time I'm going to think about finding freedom, and this time I'm going to think about enjoying confidence. Like I like that
Yeah.
that spin that you can put on that so that your practice time probably is completely different between those two sessions, even if it's the same song.
Yes, and it will feel different and even come across differently. So
Yeah,
it's fun to
right.
play with those differences and see and just see like what you enjoy more and what suits the situation and yourself. But
Yeah.
it's really a cool expansive exercise to like tap into yourself. There's one I think I heard this somewhere else. I'm trying to remember where, but it's similar to what you said. It's the cue would be play with extremes.
Mm,
And
hmm.
so, right, if you're singing a country song, really sing that as a
Yeah.
country song,
Yeah,
or maybe
right.
sing it more like as an opera song and
Right.
find a balance in between, but don't be afraid to like sound funny, which is what you tell me in voice.
Absolutely. Well, right. Yeah, that's a huge mantra. I think that we have to, again, similarly to what you've been saying, let go of judgment, not think that sounds are good or bad. It's just colors, right? And it's
Right.
extremes. I mean, you have to play with all of those so that you really know that all the colors that your voice is capable of. Yeah, that's so cool. I
Yeah.
love this. Yeah, these are
Yeah,
these are
yeah.
great things.
So
Okay.
cues, that's one I do.
Sarah says, is an effective cue to try to play and sing like an artist you admire?
Yes, that's actually one of my cues that I came up with because I have artists that I really admire. I'm sure we all
Hmm.
do.
Hmm.
And yeah, my cue for that is be another artist.
Yeah.
And then I can take that on, right?
Yeah.
And it's so simple too. Instead of saying, you know, play with this style at this tempo and do it and hold your posture like this and do this and
Right.
this and this and this. It can be a checklist and then it can become stale like that, right? But as soon as
Exactly.
I'm like, sing this like Sarah Bareilles, ooh, that's very
Yeah.
unique, right? And
Yeah.
when I do it, I hear the difference. I personally hear the
Mm,
difference and I feel the difference. And then you just try on different styles. Yeah. Do you do
absolutely.
that?
I do that. Yes, I definitely do that. So, there's a stigma in the classical world sometimes of trying to sound like someone else. And
Oh,
I agree. You want to sound like
oh,
yourself,
oh,
right?
okay.
But I think that it's really helpful to, for me, I watch other singers and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I love her confidence. I love her stage presence. Now I'm going to try to practice this as if I was this person and see if I can kind of encapsulate some of that. Or, you know, I
Hmm.
noticed that her sound is so warm. What if I try to make my sound that warm? And I think that's really
Yes.
helpful. So I think that imitation, there's a discussion in the music world whether that's good or not. I'm totally a fan of it. And I think that
Yeah.
again, it's all about discovering different colors that you're capable of, different emotions, different freedom, or confidence that you might not be able to access otherwise. So I love that.
Yeah, and it's this way to like build on the gifts that we've been given as musicians.
Sure.
And some of those gifts are other people, right?
Mm,
We're drawn to certain music for certain reasons. So instead of like having to navigate and find that on our own, we have these people that we admire who have given us the gift of their performances and their music and their style. And it always will be different coming out of your mouth or your
right.
instrument. It will always be different. It'll be you.
Right.
But yeah, I see those as gifts too.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
guess I
I
fall
like
more in
that.
line with that. I didn't know that was a
Yeah.
debate.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
See that as gifts. Yeah. Yeah. Love that. So, okay, great. Let's move on here. So, how have your studies informed your own music making? You've already talked to this a
Mm.
little bit, but since you've been doing this, have you noticed differences in your own performing or songwriting? It might be hard to know because you've been studying this for so long, I'm sure.
Well, no, I think one of the ways it has um, is like approaching what I'm doing with new eyes, instead of, I think all my work, like linguistics and counseling, psychology, and being a psychologist, so all of my education and work has helped me point back to that space of like, don't assume you know it. And even if you know it and you can speak really well about it, don't don't assume that you can implement it
Yeah.
and that
Tell
you've
me
got it
about it.
down. And
That's so
so
true.
it's
Yeah.
that space of like, I'll share this story. So one of the things I do this in my therapy work, but I do it specifically with musicians, is I have them imagine that they have lived a full, did I cut out? Something
Oh,
popped up. Okay.
I can hear you now. Yeah. Uh-huh.
They've lived a full, rewarding life, and now they're writing their obituary. So it's not morbid, but they are writing their obituary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as they do this, I have them explore like what do they want people to remember about them? What do they um, what do they hope to remember themselves after those experiences? Like what are the characteristics that float to the top? So this is something I do regularly. I've done it for years and years, okay? But I've never
Mm-hmm.
actually done it myself. And so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
until
Yep.
about, I want to say like 3 to 6 months ago, I sat down and I did this for myself. And it was really powerful actually, because it was this experience for me of creating the space for myself to not like know it and understand it, but to try it on and to experience it. And when I did it, like I noticed what was most important for me and what floated to the top. And that has really informed my like my everyday actions and some of the goals that I set. But it was this assumption of like, and just like, a passing assumption. It wasn't like I know everything, but it was like,
Right.
oh, I do this all the time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But when I sat down to do it myself, it was such a journey and a really informative
Yeah.
one. So I would say like all of my experience as a linguist and a psychologist has led me to this place of like, be flexible and be willing to hold that space for yourself, that there's more there than you're seeing, and let yourself like dive into that journey for your own growth and your own self.
Absolutely. Right. It's all about staying curious and also realizing that
Yeah.
you don't know and you never will.
Right. It's that if you throw that extreme in there of like, and then well, if you know, and you're just so sure that you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like there's a
Don't
problem
trust that
there.
person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoever says that.
It reminds me of this
Yeah.
research. So Tasha Ulrich wrote a book called Insight, and she talks a lot about this. And the whole book's about self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I regularly teach because this concept is so valuable. Um, we all have blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
all of us.
Hmm.
It's just so easy to recognize other people's.
Yeah.
And we don't say anything about, we, for the most part, we like let them slide, but we see them.
Right.
And, but we don't realize that we have them too, and that
Right.
other people are letting them slide by. And so it's this real journey to understand yourself, allow yourself to grow, and then know that you're not done. And
Right.
there's more, and there's more depth there, and there's more understanding. And just like the rewards of doing this work is really, really awesome. So like it's worthwhile work, but it actually is like in the moment kind of disheartening to be like, dang it, why didn't I see that? You know?
Yeah.
Oh no,
Right.
I'm doing that in my own life, and I'm like teaching these, excuse me, teaching these concepts. So it's just, it's not a destination that you just land at. And if you do, just gently nudge yourself back to, oh yeah, I've got them too. Even if I'm not seeing them, they're there.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's funny what you were mentioning earlier about the obituary practice that you do.
Yeah,
That's a weird way to say that, but
I know, I know.
um,
People are like, what?
what? I'm reading. Have you ever read Covey's Seven Habits for Highly Effective People? It's this old
Oh, yeah, I'm aware of the book. I don't think
book.
I've actually read it, but he's from Utah, right? The guy
I
that
think he
Covey.
is
Yeah,
a Covey.
Stephen
Yeah.
Covey. Yeah, we
He.
know him. He's like family friends, but I don't tell
Oh,
him. I haven't
really?
actually
Okay.
read the book yet, but I
Yeah,
should.
that's all right. No, this book has been on my shelf. I like keep trying to read it. I've been trying to read it for years, and it's just one of those that like I have never gotten through. And so I just picked it up, and some other voice people I know are reading it. So I'm trying to like have some accountability this time. And the second habit, I forget what the name is, but that's exactly the thing that he describes too. He does it a little bit differently in that, you picture yourself at your own funeral and asking what you want your family to say
Oh,
about you, what you want your
yeah,
friends to
yeah.
say about you, your coworkers, and then whatever community you're involved in, whether it's a church or some kind of service, what you want them to say about you, and kind of starting from there and then working backwards. And exactly what you were saying, seeing what
Yeah.
floats up, seeing what's important in the long run, and then basing your life around that. But yeah, the book, someone's
Yeah.
asking, the book is Seven Habits for Highly Effective
Highly
People.
effective. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That
Hmm.
is ringing a bell now. Well,
Yeah.
and that makes me think too, like, so these practices are common. We have like, different flavors of this tool,
Hmm.
but they're so valuable because they help you pull back and assess your life differently than you do on a day to day. In fact, if I can take a little tangent,
Go for it.
um, I listened to podcasts, and one of them that I was listening to recently was talking about near-death experiences. So my
Hmm.
husband and I were having these conversations, and there's a lot to learn from like that end of life experience. So one thing was people were saying when they have a near-death experience, they come back and the day-to-day feels very different because they want to pull back from that and look at the broader picture. And there's actually like there's research around like end of life care and like what people regret on their deathbed. And one of the things that floats to the top in that research is that people regret living a life based on what people expect them to do rather than what they feel or wanted to do in their life. So I feel like all of this really ties into like kind of put ourselves in that place and allow us to have like kind of a creative journey of, well, what does that mean for me? So for me personally, like as I went through this experience, I said it was like it was pretty changing for me. Like
Mm.
one of the things, so my dad was a singer-songwriter and he captured his narrative through song. He wouldn't have
Mm.
said that. He would have just said he was a badass musician, like making music.
Yeah.
But he passed away about 15 years ago, and I inherited all of his music. And as I go through it, I see the narrative of his life in that music.
Oh.
And his mom, similarly, was a musician, and that was a big part of her life. And so I realized I want to share my life in my
Hmm.
music, right? And so it
Hmm.
took me like hopping to the end and walking myself back to say, I, this is
Yeah.
what's really important for me. And it really struck me doing that. And it has changed my day to day because of that.
Yeah. That's so neat. Yeah, I just don't think we take the time to do that enough. And hopefully, John, my husband and I have talked about maybe one of the good things that will come out of all of this past year is that people slow down enough to actually ponder those questions and think about them. I know that we've had, we've we've started asking our, he's always been really good at that, but I'm one of those that just works all the time and won't slow down long enough to really think and ponder. And I know that I have been really challenged this past year to think a little bit more big picture, and it's been so rewarding. It's scary, but so
it is
rewarding.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is scary because then as soon as you're looking those things in the eye, it's like, okay, what are you going to do about it?
Exactly.
But it's really telling of like it can, I think of it as a compass, like it can really point you in the right direction. So you're spinning your wheels less. Yeah, I would recommend doing this. If you haven't done this yet, to write. For me, it was a couple paragraphs and it was life-changing. So to like sit back and give yourself some quiet space to put words to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to do that. That's great.
And
okay.
That's for all of the listeners. I
everybody.
Can't even tell who's on here or what, but
yeah, we have a few
that's
people.
For you too.
Okay. Marcelo is asking, and a few people have agreed with him. The fear of being an imposter, a fraud, or a sham is very common in anxious musicians. Children of highly critical, accomplished parents might stress on meeting parental or the audience's expectations. How can musicians start deconstructing this rooted or even unconscious narrative?
Ooh, good question. So let me answer this with my psychology hat on. So we all start from a place when we're born that we figure out who we are based on the people around us. So from like, just born, we're looking around and we're seeing how people treat us, how they act towards us. And that can be a myriad of ways, right? Like it can be overly hypercritical, it can be nurturing and loving, it can be anywhere in between. And so as we grow and there's like a developmental shift that will happen, a lot of times it's tied with adolescence, but I see it like I worked at a university for a while and I see that shift through 20s. And the truth is a lot of people don't make this shift. So it's an important shift to be aware of. But it's this idea of it. So when we reference other people to know who we are, that's like an other reference or an external reference of self. And it takes this shift developmentally to understand that and push for a space to do a more internal reflection and identifying who you are and who you want to be. And this is a painful process because if it doesn't align with the people that we love or if it veers from things that we've been taught, this is a really difficult push to make. But the idea is if you can reference yourself and find that space for yourself, push back when you need to, it creates this really healthy dynamic that includes boundaries with parents and boundaries of like some of those negative messages that we let in. So if if the voice that we're hearing is a negative parent who's been hypercritical of our music performance or in whatever way, if that's what's popping up, then that's what we're working on to say, I can see where that came from, but that does not serve me. And I'm going to do it different because of what I feel and what I deserve. And really being able to value your perception of yourself over others in a healthy, developed way. To say, I'm going to make space for myself here to do this differently, and it's going to hurt, and you can do it.
Yeah.
So that's the work that I would focus on in that situation, and that concept, like letting that concept sink in, and knowing that pushing into that space is uncomfortable, like we're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. It's work. It's work. Everything we're talking about is work. None of it comes easy.
Yes. It's growing pains. I was telling my husband recently, I was like, so I started this business that I'm doing. It's been about a year. And I'm like, I think I'm having growing pains. Like I have to learn so much. And I felt this through grad school too. I'm sure you do too, doing your doctorate. That like, oh, you want me to grow that much?
Yeah.
Oh, you want me to learn these things about myself and about teaching? It's painful.
It is.
Then we get to a place where we're like, oh, that used to be hard and it's not hard anymore. So
exactly.
there is a light there at the end of that tunnel, but in the moment, like the fact that it hurts doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong.
Ah,
It
yeah.
means you're growing.
See, we're coming back. We're coming back. It comes
Yes,
back
yes, yes.
around. Okay, there was
It
one
does.
more question that I missed back here. I'll try to see if I can find it really fast
Yeah,
from
let's get them.
our friend Danny, and then we'll wrap up here. Um, okay, he says, sometimes I hate my voice when I hear it. I feel so shy with my voice, and I'm wanting someone to say your voice is unique. But no, I'm going to say it. I'm trying to say it to myself, and it's not helping. So it looks like he's trying to convince himself that he likes his voice, that it's unique, but it's not helping that he's saying it to himself. So I guess
Ooh,
maybe
yes.
questions about that or
This is Danny again.
uh-huh, yep.
Danny, yes, you are in this space that we're talking about. You're in this space of what's more important, the way other people feel about my voice or how I feel. And we can do the other referenced really well, and it's very comforting. Like if I feel insecure about my voice to sing and have someone say, "Whoa, you have a nice voice," then I'm like, "Yes, I have a nice voice." But the opposite, to say that to yourself, "Yeah, I have a nice voice." It's not always as like powerfully convincing, but ultimately it's what matters more, right? Like searching for and finding this place of making space for you to show up, and that means you with your voice,
Mm,
in your music.
hmm.
And so you are in this space that we're talking about. So the push is to I would say, like on the day to day, when you notice yourself wanting to check in with other people, it's okay to feel that way, but I would feel it, recognize what it is, recognize that it's a way to reference yourself using other people, and then redirect to say what's most important here.
Mm.
And maybe even ask yourself questions. What are the things about my voice that I value? What makes my voice different than other voices?
Yes.
Some of the voices that I love out there, music or like speakers or comedians, they have such unique voices. I just imagine them going through a similar process of like, do you know who David Sedaris is?
Yes, uh-huh.
He comes to mind because he has
Yes.
such a different voice. And at first
Yes.
you hear his voice and it's like, and now anytime I hear his voices, I'm like, oh, I know this is going to be good because he's just so
Exactly.
funny and good. But
Exactly.
yeah, I
Yeah.
would ask yourself what makes my voice different than others.
I love that. I don't, yeah, and I actually I might have asked you this in our first voice lesson, but one of my favorite things to do in my first voice lessons with students is ask them two things they like about their voice, and then we talk about the things we want to
Oh
improve.
yeah, yeah.
But I like starting with that question because it gives me a lot of insight. First of all, some students just have a hard time naming anything good about themselves, and that gives me really good insight that okay, this is
Yeah.
someone that we need to really work on, someone that we need to work on maybe confidence or there's definitely
Right.
a strong self-critic in there that we're going to have to work with. um,
Right.
and it also tells me, some people say, well, I really like that I can sing really low, or I like this. If I'm working with singer songwriters, sometimes they say I like this raspy quality that I have, and that's great information for me, because if they like that and that's part of who they are and who they see themselves as, I don't want to take that and change it. Maybe we'll
Right.
find
You don't
it.
want to iron that out. You
No,
want to keep
no,
that.
exactly. So I think that that's something that's a really hard question for a lot of people to answer. But I think that just as far as singing, sitting down and just thinking about what are things that I actually like about my voice, and yeah, that can kind of tie into what we're talking about, being, finding what's unique about you. What are you're a
Yeah.
singer, so obviously there's something that you like about it. There's something that's
Right.
drawing you to this, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
music is such a pure like way to
Mm-hmm.
show up and like show those differences
Right.
that you don't want to iron those out. You don't want to, you want to refine, you want to grow, but it's kind of like we were saying to trying on different artists and like seeing what we like and don't like.
Right.
But ultimately the idea, hopefully, is that like you can show up in your music,
Mm-hmm.
that you can yeah, show up, whether that's voice, instrument, but like let other people be a part of that and like push yourself to be seen in those situations, which is hard because that's pretty vulnerable. But ultimately to show up and share that gift with other people. I mean, that's why we do it, right? And it's so
Absolutely.
connecting and it's so powerful. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I
so
think
Danny, stick with it. I would say record yourself a lot. I
yes,
had a mentor that would
absolutely.
say, Lane Fisher was my mentor at my counseling psychology program, but he would say the first 100 times are the hardest. And it would just make me laugh because I'm like, I don't want to do something hard 100 times.
100 times. Yeah.
But it's that idea of like, record yourself, Danny,
Yeah,
record yourself. Then do
absolutely.
it again. Then feel uncomfortable. Then do it again. Then as soon as you can start tuning into those things that you love and like the differences, then do it again. Then do it again. And at 100, you'll be like, oh, this is such a different experience for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I love that. That's exposure therapy, right?
Yes, that
I
is what it's called. Ooh,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. Just trying to
Okay,
pull
okay.
a
One
fast
last
one on
question.
you.
We got one more and then we'll wrap it up
Okay,
here.
okay.
Okay, Caitlin mentioned holding herself accountable and reading. How much do you both hold yourselves accountable and facing discomfort with your practicing? Oh, oh man, that's
Wait, who
good.
is this again?
This is Sarah.
Sarah.
Oh,
Okay,
she's
how
bringing the
much
hard truth.
do we hold ourselves accountable? How do
Yeah.
you read that? Like, what does that mean to
So,
you?
how do you both hold yourselves accountable and facing discomfort with practicing? So, what I'll say is, okay, I've always said that I love teaching, I love performing, and for me, I feel like I have to do both of them. Like in my life, I have a calling to do both of these things because I am a much better teacher when I perform, and I'm a much better performer when I teach. They both inform each other. So
Yes.
when I tell my students, I try to put myself out there as much as possible. I'm still doing auditions. I still try, if I have an opportunity, I'm getting up and performing in front of people, especially now that, again, I am feeling this new performance anxiety that I started feeling over the past couple of years. For me, I'm like, okay, this means that I need to do it more often because it's something that I'm going to have to practice and get better at, especially if I'm telling my students to do this. I can't do that. I can't tell them to do it and not do it myself. So I would say that's the way that I try to hold myself accountable. I'm also going to do a lot more of this, I forget what you call it, but your exercise
Exercise
induced.
effect.
Yes, I want to try this. This is a way that I'm going to hold myself accountable to practicing discomfort in my own practice. I think that's a great idea.
Oh, yes, I love that you do the thing that you're teaching and that you like really dive into the deep end. I think I would say I try to do similarly like that. I I don't feel like I've arrived in these places
No.
because it's just a journey. And
Yeah,
so
right.
like for myself, it looks like a lot of self-talk. So when I'm practicing, when I'm performing, and like weaving these concepts into my life regularly and trusting that process because I've seen it again and again. So um, being able to push myself and be like, I don't know, I was just thinking, even on the granular, yeah, level of like, how am I feeling uncomfortable? So I'll do that on my own practice. Or if I avoid a practice and I skip a practice, I'll be like, what was I feeling? What
Oh,
was my excuse to not do it? And how can I tune into what was happening for myself so that I can see it clearer
oh
and
man.
then without judgment and just to say, oh, yep, that's my avoidance strategy. That's what I was doing. Okay. And then how can I do it differently and push myself in those ways? So a lot for
Yes.
me is like really slowing down the process.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Oh, that's good about not practicing. I'm gonna have to use that because I just get in this downward spiral of
Mm.
oh, I didn't practice.
Hmm.
Oh, I didn't do it again today. Oh no, something's
Well,
wrong
and I
with
hate
me.
living in that space too, because I'm like, it just like makes me feel worse. And then I miss another day and I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
exactly.
But no,
Exactly.
it's this like really self-compassionate place of like, oh, like you said, getting curious. Oh, what was happening? What was
Yeah.
I feeling? What was going on? Oh, okay, I can see that. Or even physically, like, what am I feeling? Am I feeling certain tension? Am I feeling certain fears? Putting names to it, just like really slowing that down and being willing to look at it and then hop back in.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay, so Stephanie's asking what's the best way to get in touch with you? That actually brings us to our last thing we'll talk about today, which is your
Huh.
Elite Performance Academy. So, yeah, as I said, Sierra and I met each other through Instagram, through social media, but because she works specifically with musicians, so we kind of have a similar, some of the things I was talking about, and she was talking about, were lining up. And one of the things that I really like that she does is she does offer this Elite Performance Academy for musicians, which I'll have her talk about now. And it's actually in my link tree in my bio if you guys want to check it out. So how about you tell us just a little bit about that while we wrap up
Yeah.
today?
Okay, I love talking about this too. I just get so nerdy about these topics. So obviously this comes from a really genuine place for me. I grew up super anxious, but I didn't have a word. I didn't have that word for it.
Right.
And now I do, and now I know how to work with it. So
Hmm.
as I was creating my business and thinking through all of this, I wanted to work with musicians. I knew that. And I also know that a lot of musicians starting out aren't like rolling in cash. So like my individual hours are 150 and I like to do sessions weekly.
Hmm.
And I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, I know that a lot that will like filter out a lot of people that I want to be working with. So instead, when COVID hit, I had this idea for years and then COVID hit and I was like, okay, now's the
Here
time
we
to do
go.
this.
Yeah.
So I started creating all the content for it and I've created an academy. So I
Hmm.
cover these like A to Z. I cover all these psychological principles that come up in performance. And I give you actionable things to do. I've added a worksheet in there. It's a editable PDF. So you download it and you can actually type into it and answer some of the more specific questions on it. And otherwise, it's just a really concrete, gives you tools to take away. And I've created all of this and put it into the Elite Performance Academy. So if you go to Caitlin's link tree, you'll see that there. That'll take you straight to me. I'm on the inside of the academy. And I'm just there, like, really excited to be getting messages from people, hop into the content, and then I'm there. So I also knew that, like, I didn't want to just, like, create this course and then just throw it out there and sell it, because I think that a lot of the value comes from time of, like, practicing these things, hopping
Hmm.
into the exercise effect, doing it, talking about specific places you get stuck. So I've created a community piece to that
I love
where
that.
we're all in
Yep.
there helping each other. It's new, it's getting started, so hop
Hmm.
in. But then you also have direct contact with me. So as people send me messages about where they're getting stuck, I'm regularly giving feedback either directly to the person or in a community space to say, here's where we're getting stuck. Let's talk about what to do to get out of this. So I wanted to give people that space, not just like, here's a course, go do it or don't do it, but like, here's a course, do it. I'm here helping you.
Yeah.
And as a community, we have the concepts and we'll grow together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
That's
go to
such a
Caitlin's
great
link
idea.
tree, hop in, and then I'm right there on the other end of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was able to look at it just a little bit before we talked, and it looks like such a great resource. So yeah, if you're interested in that, I did put it in my bio in my link tree, and there's a code too that you can use for 25%
Oh
off
yeah,
that
yeah.
Dr. Baird has graciously offered anyone that has been listening or finds that link. So yeah,
It's
it's
$25 off,
$25.
just
What
to
did I
clarify.
say?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
think you said
25.
percent.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah, yeah,
$25 off. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So, yeah, this is I want to. Sierra is great, and I've enjoyed getting to know her. So I think that she would be a great resource for any musician that's struggling with this stuff. Which I don't know someone that's not struggling with this stuff. We're all struggling and working through this stuff.
Yeah, I actually have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Is this something that you were taught going through any of your music programs?
So no, it really. I mean, it was mentioned,
Psychological principles of performance?
right? It
I
not
haven't
really.
heard of it being common.
No, the only thing
So,
that I've heard is actually it's CU Boulder. I know that they have a group that's specifically for musicians, and I think
oh,
it's run
awesome.
through the therapy department where they have group therapy for musicians. That's the only
Mm.
thing I've heard of with a school that's implementing any of this. But with some of my best friends, for some reason, I'm friends with a lot of therapists, and we've all talked
Oh.
about how this needs to be, how we can partner together. Because I mean, as a voice
Yeah.
teacher, a lot of the things I try not to be people's therapist because that's not my job, but of
Yeah,
course
yeah.
these things overlap so much, and I think that students need this, singers, not just
Yeah.
students, singers and people.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I have not seen this like
Hmm.
out there in any of the music settings I was in. So
Hmm.
that's why I created this. I'm like, let's have
It's
this
such a good
community.
idea. Yeah,
And
I
the
love that.
discount is your handle, right? Caitlin H.
Yes,
Moore.
yes, yes. So if
So
you
do
want to,
that, get 25 bucks off.
exactly,
Make sure to get
exactly.
that.
Yep. It's in my link tree if you guys want to find it. And also be sure to follow Dr. Sierra Baird on Instagram as well. She posts
Come
about a
follow
lot
me.
of this stuff. Yeah. And it's great. So, Well,
I
thank
love
you
talking
so
about it.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell. And that
Well, it's
that
like
it's good.
the academy too. I was
Uh-huh.
like, I just want to be talking about this stuff all the time. So in my
Yeah.
individual sessions, a lot, I find myself saying all the time, well, I was reading this research. I was doing this the other day. And then I'm like, now I have a community, an academy that I can be like a total nerd about it. And they care and they nerd out about it too. So
Exactly.
if you're nerdy about these situations, come be nerdy with me. And we'll just like get to the bottom of it and practice and practice and
Yes.
practice.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see
Thank you.
you on social media. We'll see you online.
Okay, thank you
All
so
right.
much. This is fun.
Bye. Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.